Welcome to NHT Radio Story, the place where we dissect the ideas that shape our world. Today, we're going to talk about a ghost, a specter that has haunted America for over a century. Not a supernatural ghost, but an ideological one. A single word that, when uttered at the right moment, could destroy careers, divide families, and push an entire nation to the brink of hysteria. The word is communism. In 1848, Karl Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, "A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism." But perhaps nowhere on earth has that specter found a more dramatic, tragic, and persistent stage than in the United States of America. Our central question today is simple, but the answer is incredibly complex. Is America truly afraid of communism? Or is that fear itself a tool, a weapon sharpened for other purposes? Patient Zero, the birth of a fear. Many assume this fear began with the Cold War, with Stalin, the Iron Curtain, the arms race. They'd be wrong. To understand the American fear, we have to go back further. Let's return to the end of World War I. America was changing. Cities were exploding with immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. Factories were booming. And with them came labor unrest. Strikes erupted. Radicals, anarchists, and yes, communists began to find their voice. And then, in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution succeeded in Russia. To the American establishment, this was not a revolution of liberty. This was chaos. It was the image of an upside-down world where private property was seized, religion was abolished, and the social order was shattered. This is when the first Red Scare was born. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, following a few anarchist bombings, launched his infamous Palmer raids, rounding up thousands of suspected radicals with little to no due process. The fear was seeded, but it was just a seed. It would take decades for it to grow into a forest so dense it blocked out the sky. The Witching Hour, McCarthy and the Hunt. Let's jump to the 1950s. The Cold War is at its zenith. The Soviets have the bomb. China has fallen to communism. The Iron Curtain, in the words of Winston Churchill, has descended across the continent. America wasn't just fighting an external enemy. They began to believe the enemy was inside. And then a man appears, a little-known senator from Wisconsin, Joseph McCarthy. In February 1950, McCarthy gives a speech claiming he holds in his hand a list of 205 names of Communist Party members working in the State Department. Ironically, that number kept changing. 205, then 57, then 81. It didn't matter. The numbers didn't matter. The accusation did. And so, McCarthyism began. This was no longer a vague fear. It was now a tangible political weapon. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, began subpoenaing Hollywood screenwriters, actors, and directors. Universities fired professors. Neighbors informed on neighbors. The question, "Are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?" became a career-destroying incantation. It didn't matter if you were a spy. It only mattered if you might have attended a meeting you thought was for peace. You were suspect. The great playwright Arthur Miller, in his play The Crucible, used the 17th century Salem witch trials as an allegory for his own time. He wrote, "The political fear was turning men into accomplices to their own destruction."
So the question becomes, was America afraid of communism, or were they afraid of each other?
Why the fear? A war of ideas. So why? Why does the idea of communism provoke such a visceral, terrifying reaction in the American psyche? Many European nations have legal communist parties. Why in America is it the ultimate taboo? The answer lies in America's very DNA. 1. Individualism and the American dream. America is built on a myth, a very powerful myth, that anyone, from nothing, can rise to become a millionaire. This is the American dream. It is based on rugged individualism and private property. Your house is yours. Your business is yours. Your success is yours. Communism, in theory, is the direct antithesis. It speaks of collectivism. It says property is communal. To the American psyche, this translates to, I am going to take your house. It's not just an economic disagreement, it's an assault on American identity. 2. Religion and atheism. America is, fundamentally, a deeply religious nation. So why? Why does the idea of communism provoke such a visceral, terrifying reaction in the American psyche? Many European nations have legal communist parties. Why in America is it the ultimate taboo? The answer lies in America's very DNA. 1. Individualism and the American dream. America is built on a myth, a very powerful myth, that anyone, from nothing, can rise to become a millionaire. This is the American dream. It is based on rugged individualism and private property. Your house is yours. Your business is yours. Your success is yours. Communism, in theory, is the direct antithesis. It speaks of collectivism. It says property is communal. To the American psyche, this translates to, I am going to take your house. It's not just an economic disagreement, it's an assault on American identity. 2. Religion and atheism. America is, fundamentally, a deeply religious nation. Their currency says, in God we trust. Classical communism, per Marx, famously called religion the opiate of the masses. To much of America, the fight against communism wasn't just capitalism versus socialism. It was God versus godlessness. 3. Liberty and totalitarianism. The irony is that the fear of communism often led to the very behaviors America claimed to despise. Americans looked at Stalin's Soviet Union, at the gulags, the censorship, the secret police, and they saw an evil empire. They feared that even a little red would lead to the total collapse of free speech. But, as we saw with McCarthy, that very fear nearly turned America into its own version of a surveillance state.
The Cold War and the real stakes. If McCarthyism was the internal war, the Cold War was the external one. And this time, the fear wasn't about what books your neighbor was reading. The fear was nuclear annihilation. When the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb, the game changed. America, for the first time in its history, felt vulnerable. This fear shaped all of American foreign policy for 50 years. Why did America fight in Korea? The domino theory. They feared if Korea fell, all of Asia would follow. Why did America plunge into Vietnam, a war that tore the country apart? Because they believed they were fighting communism in Hanoi, so they wouldn't have to fight it in San Francisco. Why did American school children practice duck and cover drills under their desks? Because the fear of nuclear attack was a daily, visceral reality. This was no longer an abstract, ideological fear. This was the fear of apocalypse. Ronald Reagan captured this spirit when he called the Soviet Union the focus of evil in the modern world. When you define your enemy not as a rival, but as evil, there is no room for compromise.
The specter in the present. Is the fear still here? In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Berlin Wall was down. Francis Fukuyama famously declared it the end of history, that liberal democracy had won. So the ghost was exorcised, right? The fear is over, right? If you listen to American political debate today, the answer is no. The ghost never left, it just shape-shifted. Today, the word communist is used less. Instead, the political weapon of choice is socialism. A politician proposes universal health care? That's socialism. A proposal to raise taxes on billionaires? That's socialism. A plan to address climate change? That's a pathway to communism. Why does the word socialism carry such weight in the U.S.? Because in the American mind, socialism isn't Sweden or Canada. Socialism is the first step on the slippery slope to Venezuela, to Cuba, and ultimately to the Gulag. At the same time, America faces a new communist rival, China. But this is a different, more complicated fear. America isn't afraid China will impose Maoism on them. They fear Beijing's economic, technological, Huawei, TikTok, and military rise. Ironically, the threat from China isn't that they are too communist, but that they have mastered a powerful model of state capitalism.
What is America afraid of?
So, let's return to our original question. Is America afraid of communism? Yes. The fear is genuine. They fear the loss of private property. They fear the collapse of religious order. They fear the totalitarianism that claimed tens of millions of lives. This fear is not baseless. But the answer is also no, because the fear of communism in America is more than just a fear. It is a political tool used to silence dissent. It is a national identity forged in opposition to the Soviet Union. America is not communist. And perhaps most profoundly, it is a mirror. America fears communism because it exposes the cracks in its own system. As the philosopher Erich Hoffer said, we are told to love our enemies, but in politics we are often advised to hate them, for they are the reason for our existence. For over a century, communism was America's reason. Now that the old enemy is gone, the biggest question America faces is, if there is no communist specter left to fear, who is America?